When divorced mother of two Rachel Blackwood accepted the keys to her late uncle's dilapidated farmhouse in the remote mountains of Idaho, she thought she was inheriting nothing more than a renovation nightmare and a desperate escape from her crumbling life in Phoenix. But beneath the rotting floorboards and abandoned livestock pens lay a Cold War-era secret that would expose Vanguard Industries' half-century cover-up and transform not just her family's future, but the fate of an entire region. For hidden in the depths of an abandoned missile silo was evidence that one of America's most powerful defense contractors had spent 50 years ensuring would never surface. Before we dive into Rachel's incredible journey, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if stories of courage and hidden truths inspire you, make sure you hit that subscribe button because tomorrow I've saved something absolutely extraordinary for you. The day everything collapsed. The Phoenix sun beat down mercilessly on the Maricopa County Family Court building as Rachel Blackwood emerged through the heavy glass doors, her hands trembling so badly she could barely grip her leather portfolio. Inside that portfolio were documents that officially dissolved her 8-year marriage to Derek Blackwood, granted her primary custody of their 2 daughters with supervised visitation for him, and left her with exactly $4,200 in her checking account after legal fees. At 36 years old, Rachel felt decades older. The past 2 years had aged her in ways that had nothing to do with the gray strands now visible in her dark auburn hair or the permanent worry lines etched around her green eyes. It was the kind of aging that happened to your soul when you discovered your husband's addiction to prescription painkillers, watched him lose his job as a commercial real estate broker, witnessed his descent into something darker and more dangerous, and then had to protect your children from someone you'd once loved with your whole heart. The custody battle had been brutal. Derek's family had money and connections, hiring aggressive attorneys who'd painted Rachel as an unstable nurse who worked too many hours and couldn't provide adequate supervision. They'd conveniently ignored Derek's 2 DUIs, the incident where neighbors called police after hearing him screaming at 10-year-old Lily through her locked bedroom door, or the time 8-year-old Maya had called 911 because Daddy won't wake up and won't stop snoring funny. But Rachel had one. Barely. And at a cost that left her financially devastated. She climbed into her 2011 Toyota Camry, its air conditioning struggling against the 107-degree heat, and allowed herself exactly 3 minutes to cry. Then she wiped her eyes, checked her reflection in the rearview mirror to make sure the girls wouldn't see she'd been crying, and drove to the after-school program where Lily and Maya waited. Lily saw through the forced smile immediately. At 12, she'd become hyper-aware of every adult mood shift, reading faces like other kids read books. "It's over," she asked quietly as Rachel signed them out. "It's over, sweetheart. We can move forward now." Maya, who'd just turned 8 and still possessed some childhood innocence, bounced on her toes. "Does this mean we don't have to see the judge lady anymore?" "No more judge lady," Rachel confirmed, taking each daughter's hand. "Does this mean Daddy's better?" Maya asked, her voice small and hopeful. Rachel's heart cracked. "Daddy needs more time to get better, baby. But he loves you both very much." The lie tasted bitter, but what else could she say? That Derek had shown up to his last supervised visitation so high he could barely form sentences? That his text messages alternated between begging for another chance and blaming her for ruining his life? That she was terrified of what he might do next? The impossible math. Back at their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a complex where sirens were white noise and neighbors shouted in 3 different languages through thin walls, Rachel spread bills across the small kitchen table and tried to make numbers work that simply wouldn't cooperate. Rent, $1,650 for 800 square feet in a neighborhood where she double-checked the locks every night. Childcare, $800 for after-school program because her nursing shifts at Phoenix Memorial Hospital often ran until 7 p.m. Car payment, $340 for the Camry she still owed 3 years on. Insurance, $220 for car, $180 for renters, $65 for the bare minimum health coverage her hospital job didn't provide. Utilities, $200 in summer when air conditioning wasn't optional. Groceries, $500 if she was incredibly careful and the girls didn't outgrow their shoes. Student loans, $280 for the nursing degree that was supposed to provide financial security. Credit cards, $200 minimum payments on the $8,000 she'd racked up during the divorce. Derek's child support was supposed to be $1,400 monthly. But he hadn't paid in 4 months, and his lawyer was already filing motions to reduce the amount, citing his diminished earning capacity. Rachel's attorney had told her collecting support from an unemployed addict would be like squeezing blood from a stone, and she should manage expectations. Her salary as a registered nurse was $68,000 annually, which sounded substantial until Phoenix's cost of living devoured it. After taxes, she brought home about $4,200 monthly. Even without Derek's support, the math could theoretically work if nothing unexpected happened. No medical emergencies, no car repairs, no school field trips or birthday parties or new winter coats. Rachel stared at the numbers until they blurred. She'd been raised by a single mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed. She knew how to survive on nothing. But this wasn't surviving, it was drowning in slow motion while her daughters watched. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway, backpack still on her shoulders. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Rachel looked at her eldest daughter, who'd been forced to grow up too fast, who now hoarded snacks in her room because some primal part of her recognized scarcity, who'd started therapy 6 months ago for anxiety that manifested in picking at her cuticles until they bled. "We're going to be better than okay," Rachel said, surprised by the conviction in her voice. "I promise you, Lily. Things are going to change." She just had no idea how true that promise would become. The unexpected call. The phone call came 3 days later during Rachel's lunch break in the hospital cafeteria. She was eating a peanut butter sandwich she'd made at home and reviewing patient charts when her phone displayed an unfamiliar 208 area code. "Ms. Blackwood? This is Lawrence Fitzgerald from Fitzgerald & Chin Legal Associates in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm the executor of your late Uncle Vincent Cartwright's estate." Rachel's sandwich paused halfway to her mouth. "Uncle Vincent? I didn't know he'd passed. When did this happen?" "6 weeks ago, Ms. Blackwood. I apologize for the delay in contacting you. Your uncle's instructions were quite specific about when and how beneficiaries should be notified." Uncle Vincent. Rachel had memories of a tall, serious man with intense gray eyes who'd visited twice when she was young, once when she was 7, once when she was 11. He'd brought her a geode that opened to reveal purple crystals and had spent an entire afternoon teaching her about rock formations and the Earth's hidden treasures. Her mother, Vincent's younger sister, had spoken of him with a complicated mixture of pride and worry, calling him brilliant but haunted before they'd lost contact around 1996. "I wasn't aware Vincent had stayed in touch with our family," Rachel said carefully. "He didn't, not directly. But he kept track of you through public records and occasional private investigators. Your uncle was very aware of your recent divorce and custody situation, Ms. Blackwood. That's actually relevant to why I'm calling." A chill ran through Rachel despite the cafeteria's warmth. "He was keeping tabs on me? Please don't be alarmed. Your uncle was deeply private and had his reasons for maintaining distance. But he wanted to ensure that if anything happened to him, his estate would go to someone he trusted would use it properly." Fitzgerald paused. "Ms. Blackwood, your uncle has left you his entire property in Salmon River County, Idaho. 280 acres of farmland, including a main house, several outbuildings, and various structures." Rachel's clinical nurse brain immediately went to practical questions. "What's the property's value?" "That's complicated. The land itself is somewhat remote, about 55 miles northeast of Coeur d'Alene, accessed by unpaved roads. Local real estate agents estimate the property could sell for $200,000 to $250,000 as is to someone looking for rural acreage. However, I should be honest, the structures are in significant disrepair. Your uncle lived alone there for 28 years with minimal maintenance. The house is barely habitable in its current state. $250,000. Rachel's mind reeled. Even after taxes and selling costs, that would be enough to move somewhere with lower cost of living, provide stability for the girls, maybe even save for their college funds. There are conditions, Fitzgerald continued. Your uncles will require that you personally visit the property and remain there for a minimum of 14 days before making any decisions about selling. During that time, you're to live in the main house and complete a list of specific tasks your uncle outlined. Only after fulfilling these conditions can you choose to sell or keep the property. What kind of tasks? The list is sealed with a letter your uncle wrote to you personally. I'm required to deliver both in person at the property. Ms. Blackwood, I realize this sounds unusual, but I knew your uncle for 15 years. He was eccentric but methodical. Everything he did had purpose. Rachel thought of her apartment lease, her hospital shifts, the girls' school. I'd need to take time off work, pull my daughters out of school temporarily. Your uncle anticipated these concerns. The estate includes a trust fund of $50,000 specifically designated for expenses related to your 2-week stay and any lost wages. Additionally, if you decide to keep the property, the trust covers property taxes for 5 years. $50,000. Plus potentially $250,000 from selling. Rachel's hand gripped the phone tighter. There's one more thing you should know, Fitzgerald added, his voice dropping slightly. About 12 years ago, a company called Vanguard Industries began making offers to purchase your uncle's land. They started at $500,000 and eventually increased their offer to $3.2 million. Your uncle refused every single offer, which apparently frustrated them considerably. The last attempt was about 18 months ago. Why would a company offer that much for a broken-down farm in the middle of nowhere? That's exactly what your uncle wanted you to figure out, Ms. Blackwood. I believe that's the real reason behind the conditions of his will. The decision. That evening, Rachel made pasta with Jared sauce while Lily did homework at the kitchen table and Maya played with her dolls in the living room. The television murmured with local news, another story about water shortages, another politician promising solutions that never materialized. Girls, family meeting, Rachel called, turning off the burner. Both daughters appeared with the wariness of children who'd learned that family meetings usually meant bad news. Lily's hands immediately went to her cuticles. Nothing bad, Rachel said quickly. Something strange. Maybe good. I don't know yet. She told them about Uncle Vincent, the farmhouse in Idaho, the conditions of the will. She kept it simple, age-appropriate, focusing on the adventure aspect for Maya and the practical possibilities for Lily. We'd leave Phoenix? Maya's eyes widened. Like, on an airplane? We'd drive. It's about 18 hours, so we'd make it a road trip. 2 weeks in Idaho, and then we'd decide what to do next. What about school? Lily asked, ever practical. I'd talk to your teachers, get assignments you could work on. It's only 2 weeks. What about Dad? Lily's voice went quiet. Rachel had anticipated this question. Dad has supervised visitation scheduled 3 weeks from now. This wouldn't interfere with that. And we can video call him from Idaho if he wants. Both girls knew their father rarely kept scheduled video calls, but no one said it out loud. Is the farmhouse like in the movies? Maya asked. With animals and big fields? I don't know, sweetie. We'd be finding out together. Lily studied her mother's face with disconcerting intensity. You want to do this? I can tell. Rachel sat down across from her eldest daughter. I'm tired of barely holding on, Lily. This might be a chance for something better. Or it might be nothing. But I think we should find out. What if it's scary? Maya whispered. Rachel pulled her youngest onto her lap. Then we'll be scared together. But we'll also be together, and that's what matters. Preparations. The next week passed in a controlled chaos of preparations. Rachel negotiated a 2-week unpaid leave from the hospital, promising to take extra shifts when she returned. She notified the girls' school administrators, collected homework assignments, and prepared detailed lesson plans to keep them on track academically. Derek's response to her notification about temporarily relocating to Idaho came via his lawyer, a terse email stating he neither approved nor disapproved and expected his visitation schedule to be honored. No personal message to the girls. No questions about why or where or whether they'd be safe. Rachel packed their entire lives into the Camry in a small U-Haul trailer: clothes, toiletries, the girls' favorite toys and books, Rachel's nursing textbooks, non-perishable food, sleeping bags and air mattresses in case the farmhouse beds were unusable. She bought bear spray after Googling Idaho wildlife safety and immediately regretted falling down an internet rabbit hole about mountain lions. The night before they left, Rachel stood in the empty apartment that had witnessed the worst years of her life. She felt no nostalgia for this place where she'd cried herself to sleep more times than she could count, where police had come 3 times during Derek's worst episodes, where she'd hidden credit card bills from her daughters and pretended everything was fine. Goodbye and good riddance, she whispered to the blank walls. The journey north. They left Phoenix at 5 a.m. to beat the worst of the summer heat, the Camry loaded to capacity with the U-Haul trailer swaying slightly behind them. Maya fell asleep before they left city limits. Lily stared out the window, earbuds in, her playlist a mystery Rachel knew better than to inquire about. The landscape transformed as they drove north through Arizona into Utah. Red rocks gave way to mountains. Desert scrub became pine forests. The air grew cooler, cleaner. Rachel cracked the windows and breathed deeply for what felt like the first time in months. They stopped for lunch at a diner in Cedar City, Utah, where the waitress called them honey and brought extra fries without being asked. Maya declared the chocolate milkshake the best thing I've ever tasted, and even Lily smiled. This is nice, Lily admitted quietly as they returned to the car. Just us. Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand. Just us is pretty great. They spent the night in a budget motel in Twin Falls, Idaho, the girls sharing one bed, Rachel in the other. Maya wanted to swim in the motel pool, and for an hour, Rachel watched her daughters play in chlorinated water under fluorescent lights and felt something loosen in her chest. When was the last time they'd laughed like this? Meeting the lawyer. They met Lawrence Fitzgerald at a coffee shop in Coeur d'Alene the next morning. He was younger than Rachel expected, mid-40s, with silver-streaked dark hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He shook her hand firmly and brought coloring books and hot chocolate for the girls without being asked. Your uncle spoke of you, Fitzgerald said once they were settled. Never extensively, but with genuine affection. He regretted the distance between you. Why did he stay away? Rachel asked. My mother never fully explained it. Fitzgerald chose his words carefully. Your uncle discovered something while working for Vanguard Industries back in the early 1990s. Something that frightened him enough to leave his position as senior geological engineer, purchase that remote property, and essentially disappear from public life. He believed that maintaining distance from family kept them safe. Safe from what? That's part of what he wants you to discover. Fitzgerald withdrew a thick envelope from his briefcase. This contains keys to the property, detailed maps, the list of tasks I mentioned, and a personal letter from your uncle. I'm instructed to deliver it once we reach the farmhouse. You're coming with us? Just for the initial visit. Your uncle wanted to ensure you understood the property's layout and had everything you needed to begin. He paused. I should warn you, Ms. Blackwood, the house is in rough shape. There's electricity and well water, both functional, but beyond that, it's been largely abandoned for the 5 years since your uncle's health declined. They followed Fitzgerald's truck out of Coeur d'Alene, north on Highway 95, then east onto increasingly remote roads. Pavement became gravel, became dirt. Cell phone signals disappeared. Mountains rose on all sides, densely forested with pine and fir, their peaks still showing snow patches despite the August heat. Are we going to the end of the world? Maya asked, voice small. Feels like it, Rachel admitted, gripping the steering wheel as the Camry navigated ruts and potholes. First sight. The property appeared suddenly as they crested a ridge, a wide valley nestled between mountains, with a creek running through its center. Rachel could see the farmhouse in the distance, a two-story structure that might once have been white, now weathered gray. A large barn tilted at an alarming angle. Several smaller outbuildings dotted the landscape in various states of collapse. But it was the setting that took Rachel's breath away. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows in purple and gold. The creek sparkled in afternoon sunlight. Mountains rose like protective walls on all sides, and the sky stretched vast and impossibly blue. "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, and Rachel heard genuine wonder in her daughter's voice for the first time in months. They parked beside the house, and Rachel's nursing assessment instincts immediately cataloged problems: rotting front porch, broken windows covered with plywood, roof missing shingles, front steps that looked likely to collapse under weight. "Remember," Fitzgerald said gently, "your uncle lived here alone for nearly 3 decades. He maintained what was necessary for survival, nothing more." The front door opened with a groan that sent Maya hiding behind Rachel's legs. Inside, dust covered everything. Furniture from the 1970s sat exactly where Vincent had left it. The kitchen still had dishes in the sink. A calendar on the wall showed February 2024, the month he died at age 74 in a Coeur d'Alene hospital after a massive stroke. But despite the decay, Rachel noticed something: her Uncle Vincent had been intensely organized. Books lined every wall, meticulously arranged by subject: geology, engineering, corporate law, Idaho history, Cold War politics, environmental contamination, whistleblower protections. A massive topographical map of the property hung in what had been a study, covered with colored pins and cryptic notations in faded ink. Lily moved to the bookshelves, running her fingers along spines. He read a lot about radioactive waste disposal. And something called Superfund sites. "Mom, what's a Superfund site?" Rachel's stomach tightened. "It's a place so contaminated by pollution that the federal government has to step in to clean it up." Fitzgerald cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on getting you settled before dark. The bedrooms upstairs are in better condition than down here. Your uncle spent most of his time in the study and kitchen." They climbed creaking stairs to find 3 bedrooms, each with basic furniture covered in sheets. Fitzgerald helped Rachel drag mattresses outside to air out while the girls explored under strict instructions not to touch anything that looked unstable. As the sun descended toward the mountains, Fitzgerald built a fire in the old wood stove and made sure the well pump worked. Then he handed Rachel the sealed envelope. "Your uncle's letter and instructions. I'll check on you in 3 days, but there's a satellite phone in the kitchen if you need to reach me sooner. The nearest town is Elk Ridge, population 187, about 25 miles south. They have a small general store and a gas station. You're leaving us here?" Maya's voice rose in panic. Fitzgerald knelt to her level. "Your mom is very capable, and you're going to have an adventure. But I'll be back soon, I promise." After his truck disappeared down the dirt road, Rachel stood on the porch with her daughters, looking out at the darkening valley. The silence was absolute except for the creek's murmur and whine through the pines. No sirens, no traffic, no shouting neighbors. "Mom?" Lily's voice was uncertain. "This is really isolated." "Yes, it is. Is that good or bad?" Rachel thought about Phoenix, about the constant stress and noise and fear. "I think it might be exactly what we need." The letter. After feeding the girls sandwiches by lamplight, the electricity worked but the bulbs were all burned out, and settling them in sleeping bags in the least dusty bedroom, Rachel finally opened Vincent's letter. She sat in his old leather chair by the wood stove, the paper crackling with age in her hands. "Rachel. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've brought your daughters to the place I called home for most of my adult life. I'm sorry we never knew each other better. Your mother and I grew apart after I learned things that terrified me, things I couldn't share without putting her and you at risk. I worked for Vanguard Industries from 1987 to 1993 as a senior geological engineer on classified government contracts. In 1992, I discovered something they'd been hiding since 1969, something buried beneath the property you're now standing on. This land wasn't always a farm. During the Cold War, it was Site 7, a classified military installation designed to house intercontinental ballistic missiles aimed at Soviet targets. But Site 7 was never completed. In 1969, a catastrophic accident during construction exposed workers to massive amounts of radioactive contamination. Rather than properly containing the disaster, Vanguard Industries and their government partners buried everything, literally. They covered the contaminated site with clean soil, destroyed official records, paid off or silenced witnesses, and sold the farmland to private buyers who had no idea what lay beneath. I discovered evidence of this cover-up while conducting routine geological surveys. When I reported it to my supervisors, I was threatened, discredited, and forced to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of prosecution. So I did what I thought was the only option. I quit, used every penny I had to purchase this property before Vanguard realized I knew its secret, and spent the next 3 decades documenting evidence they thought was destroyed forever. Beneath the old barn is access to the original underground facility. In the northeast corner, you'll find a steel hatch hidden under hay bales and debris. The combination lock is your mother's birthday, March 15, 54. Inside the facility is everything I collected over 30 years, military documents, Vanguard's internal communications, medical records of workers who died from radiation exposure, geological surveys showing contamination levels that would make this entire valley a Superfund site if they became public, and financial records proving Vanguard knew about the danger and actively covered it up. This evidence is worth $157 million, the estimated cost of proper remediation and compensation to affected parties. But its value goes beyond money. It's about justice for workers who died, for families who still live downwind from contaminated groundwater, for the truth that powerful interests have buried for 50 years. I stayed silent because I was afraid. Afraid they'd destroy me, afraid they'd hurt your mother, afraid I'd spend my life in prison on fabricated charges. But you're young, strong, and the world has changed. Whistleblower protections exist now that didn't then. Media coverage and public pressure can force accountability that was impossible in the 1990s. What you do with this information is entirely your choice. You can sell the property to Vanguard for millions and walk away, they'll pay dearly to keep this buried. You can go public and fight them, though that fight will be brutal and dangerous. Or you can do what I did, hide the truth and hope someone braver comes along someday. But know this, Vanguard has wanted this land for decades. They've tried to buy it, pressure me, even threaten me through intermediaries. I've kept them at bay by making it clear that if anything suspicious happened to me, sealed documents would be automatically released to media outlets. Now that protection falls to you. Trust no one from Vanguard Industries or anyone connected to them. They have deep pockets, political connections, and no moral limitations. They've gotten away with this for 50 years because they're very good at making problems disappear. The tasks I've asked you to complete over these 2 weeks are designed to help you understand the full scope of what I discovered. By the end, you'll have enough knowledge to make an informed decision about what comes next. I'm sorry to burden you with this, Rachel. But I believe you have the strength I lacked. And your daughters deserve to grow up in a world where truth matters more than corporate profit. Take care of yourself and those beautiful girls. And whatever you decide, know that I'm proud of you. Uncle Vincent. Rachel read the letter 3 times, her hands shaking more with each pass. She looked around the study at the meticulously organized books, the detailed maps, the decades of careful documentation. Her uncle had left her more than a farmhouse. He'd left her a weapon aimed at one of the most powerful corporations in America, and the terrible burden of deciding whether to use it. Outside, the Idaho night was silent except for the wind. Somewhere in the darkness, buried beneath soil and secrets, lay evidence that could expose a conspiracy 50 years in the making. Rachel thought of her daughters sleeping upstairs, of the life they'd fled in Phoenix, of the future she wanted to build for them. She thought of workers who'd died from radiation exposure, of families still living above contaminated groundwater, of truth buried so deep most people have forgotten to even look for it. And she thought of Vincent Cartwright, brilliant and haunted, who'd spent 30 years alone with a terrible secret because he'd been too afraid to do anything else. "I'm not you, Uncle Vincent," Rachel whispered to the empty room. I'm not going to hide. Tomorrow, she would find that hatch in the barn. Tomorrow, she would see what 50 years of corporate malfeasance looked like up close. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, she went upstairs and climbed into the sleeping bag between her daughters, listening to them breathe, gathering strength from their presence. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Rachel woke to absolute silence. Not the silence of a quiet neighborhood, but the profound absence of human noise that only true wilderness provides. No traffic hum, no neighbor's television bleeding through walls, no sirens in the distance. Just birdsong and wind through pine trees. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then Maya's sleeping bag rustled beside her, and everything came flooding back. The farmhouse. Uncle Vincent's letter. The underground facility hidden beneath the barn. The $157 million secret that had consumed her uncle's life. Pale dawn light filtered through dusty windows. Rachel carefully extracted herself from between her sleeping daughters and padded downstairs in yesterday's clothes. The study looked different in morning light, less sinister, more sad. Evidence of a man who'd spent 3 decades alone with knowledge too dangerous to share. She made instant coffee with bottled water heated on the wood stove, since the electric kettle's cord had cracked with age. Vincent's letter sat on the desk where she'd left it, and Rachel read it again, looking for details she might have missed in last night's shock. The tasks I've asked you to complete over these 2 weeks are designed to help you understand the full scope of what I discovered. Rachel shuffled through the papers Fitzgerald had left. Beneath Vincent's letter was a numbered list in the same spidery handwriting. Tasks for Rachel, complete in order. Access the underground facility through the barn. Combination, March 15, 54. Document your first observations. In the facility's main chamber, locate the filing cabinet marked Medical Records 1969 to 1973. Read at least 10 individual case files. Find the geological surveys in the northwest storage room. Compare contamination levels from 1969, 1985, and 2010. Review the financial documents in the locked safe. Combination, your birthday reversed, DDMMYY format. Watch the video recordings stored in the media archives. Start with the tape labeled Site 7 Day of Incident. Read the correspondence between Vanguard executives. Pay special attention to files marked Containment Strategy. Interview Marlene Hutchins in Elk Ridge. She was a nurse at the facility in 1969. Ask her about February 18th. Photograph everything. Create digital backups. Store copies in 3 separate secure locations. Determine the current contamination levels. I've left Geiger counters and sampling equipment in the facility. Decide what to do with all of this. Rachel's hands trembled as she set down the list. Vincent had created a roadmap for understanding the conspiracy. But he'd also created evidence that she'd known about the contamination, had accessed the facility, had been given all the information necessary to go public, which meant she could never claim ignorance if Vanguard discovered her presence. Mom? Rachel turned to find Lily on the stairs, wearing yesterday's jeans and an oversized sweatshirt, hair tangled from sleep. At 12, she looked heartbreakingly young in the morning light. Morning, sweetheart. Sleep okay? Lily shrugged, coming into the study. Her eyes immediately found Vincent's letter on the desk. Is that from your uncle? The one who left us this place? Rachel made a split-second decision. Lily was mature for her age, had been forced to grow up too fast by circumstances beyond her control. She deserved some version of the truth. Yes. He explained why he lived alone out here. He discovered something dangerous, something powerful people wanted to keep secret. What kind of dangerous? This property used to be a military base during the Cold War. There was an accident with radioactive materials that hurt people. Instead of cleaning it up properly, the company responsible just covered it up and pretended it never happened. Lily's eyes widened. Radioactive? Like Chernobyl? Not that scale, but the same basic idea. Your uncle spent 30 years collecting evidence about what really happened. And now that evidence is ours? Rachel heard the ours and felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. The evidence is here, yes. What we do with it is the question. What does the evidence look like? I don't know yet. Your uncle says it's stored underground, beneath the barn. Lily moved to the window that overlooked the property. In daylight, the barn was even more dilapidated than it had appeared yesterday, roof partially collapsed, walls weathered to silver gray, leaning at an angle that suggested imminent collapse. You're going to go look at it today, Lily said. Not a question. I have to. I need to understand what Uncle Vincent wanted me to know. Can I come with you? Absolutely not. If there's radioactive contamination. You're a nurse, not a radiation expert, Lily interrupted, turning from the window with an expression too old for her years. What if something happens to you down there? What if you get hurt in Maya and I don't even know where you went? Rachel started to argue, then stopped. Lily had a point. They were 55 miles from the nearest real town, with no cell service and only a satellite phone she barely knew how to operate. Going into an underground facility alone, in an isolated location, was objectively stupid. I'll wait until Mr. Fitzgerald returns, Rachel conceded. He said 3 days. That's day after tomorrow. Lily relaxed slightly. Promise? Promise. For now, we focus on the tasks I can do safely. Your uncle left lots of information in this study. I can start there. Exploring the study. After Maya woke and they'd shared a breakfast of cereal with powdered milk, the refrigerator worked but was completely empty. Rachel set the girls up with their schoolwork at the kitchen table. Then she returned to Vincent's study to begin methodically examining what he'd left behind. The bookshelves told a story of obsession and desperation. Entire sections devoted to radiation exposure, environmental contamination, corporate malfeasance, whistleblower protections. Rachel pulled down a volume titled Corporate Crime and Cover UPS, Case Studies 1950 to 2000 and found dozens of passages highlighted in yellow, with Vincent's cramped marginalia filling every available space. They all follow the same pattern, he'd written beside a chapter on industrial pollution. Deny, discredit, delay. By the time truth emerges, responsible parties are dead or protected by statute of limitations. Another book, The Price of Loyalty, Whistleblowers in America, had an entire page folded down. The chapter was about Karen Silkwood, the nuclear facility worker who died under suspicious circumstances while investigating contamination. Vincent had underlined a single sentence, sometimes the truth costs everything. Rachel felt a chill. Had Vincent feared for his life? Was that why he'd stayed hidden? She moved to the filing cabinets lining one wall. They were locked, but the keys hung on a labeled hook beside the desk. Inside, she found decades of meticulous documentation. Drawer 1, Personal Research newspaper clippings about unexplained illnesses in Salmon River County dating back to 1970. Articles about unusual cancer clusters. Obituaries of men who died young from rare blood disorders and aggressive leukemias. Vincent had drawn red circles around certain names, with notes like worked at Site 7 or lived within 5-mile radius. Drawer 2, Property history deeds showing the land had changed hands 6 times between 1970 and 1992, always quickly, always for prices well below market value. One deed included a handwritten note from a seller, "Good riddance to cursed ground." Vincent had traced each previous owner, 3 had died of cancer, 2 had declared bankruptcy, 1 had simply disappeared. Drawer 3, Vanguard Industries. This drawer made Rachel's stomach tighten. Vincent had compiled a comprehensive dossier on the corporation, founding in 1952 as a defense contractor, billions in government contracts through the Cold War, diversification into energy and resource extraction, current status as a Fortune 500 company with $40 billion in annual revenue. But it was the personal files that disturbed her most. Vincent had researched individual Vanguard executives, tracking their careers, their connections to government officials, their patterns of silencing critics. One file, marked Kenneth Drummond, CEO 1987 to 2003, included photographs of a silver-haired man at various corporate events, along with news articles about whistleblowers who'd been discredited, sued into oblivion, or mysteriously died before testifying. "This man destroyed 12 people I can document," Vincent had written in red ink across Drummond's photo. "How many others couldn't I prove?" "Mom?" Maya appeared in the doorway, holding her stuffed rabbit. "Can we go explore outside?" "Lily says she'll watch me." Rachel glanced at the clock. They'd been working for 2 hours already. "Stay within sight of the house. And stay away from the barn, understand? It's not safe." "Why isn't it safe?" "How did you explain radiation hazards to an 8-year-old? Parts of it might collapse. Just stay near the house, okay?" After the girls went outside, Rachel continued her examination. She found Vincent's personal journals next, decades of handwritten entries documenting his isolation, his fear, his growing certainty that staying silent was wrong but lacking the courage to speak up. One entry from 1998 made her throat tight. "Saw Rachel's school photo today. Maria sent it even though we don't talk anymore. She's 12 now, same age as the Hutchins boy was when he died from the radiation. Same bright smile, same trusting eyes. Does she know there are people in the world who would poison children for profit? I hope she never has to learn. I tell myself I stay quiet to protect my family. But really, I stay quiet because I'm a coward." Rachel wiped away tears. Her uncle had been haunted, but he'd also been human. Flawed and frightened and doing the best he could with impossible circumstances. The maps. The topographical map on the wall drew Rachel's attention next. It showed the property in extraordinary detail, but it was the colored pins and annotations that told the real story. Red pins marked locations across the valley: contaminated groundwater 1985 sample, elevated radiation 2003 reading, soil samples exceed EPA limits 2010. Vincent had been testing the property for decades, and the red pins spread like a disease from the barn location outward. Blue pins indicated safe zones, consistent readings within normal range. These clustered around the house in the southern portion of the property, farthest from the barn. Yellow pins marked requires further testing and dotted the valley's creek system. Rachel traced the creek with her finger. It originated in the mountains to the north, ran through the property near the barn, then continued south toward Elk Ridge. If the contamination had reached the groundwater, it could have been spreading for 50 years, affecting downstream communities. "Jesus, Vincent," she whispered. "How many people might have been exposed?" A folder labeled Health Statistics Salmon River County provided a partial answer. Vincent had compiled mortality data going back to 1970, comparing Salmon River County to neighboring counties and state averages. The numbers were damning. Leukemia rates 340% above state average. Thyroid cancer 280% above state average. Birth defects 190% above state average. Average life expectancy 8.2 years below state average. In a handwritten note, these numbers represent human lives. Children who never grew up. Parents who buried their kids. All because Vanguard chose profit over people. Voices outside. Rachel's concentration broke at the sound of an engine. She moved to the window and felt her stomach drop. A black SUV with tinted windows was coming up the dirt road, moving slowly, deliberately. Behind it came a white pickup truck with Vanguard Industries stenciled on the door. "Lily." "Maya." Rachel called, trying to keep the panic from her voice. "Come inside right now." Her daughters must have heard the urgency because they came running immediately. Rachel locked the front door and pulled them into the study, away from the windows. "What's wrong?" Lily's voice was tight with fear. "Someone's here. Stay quiet." The vehicles parked in front of the house. Rachel watched through a gap in the curtains as 4 men emerged, 2 from the SUV in expensive business suits, 2 from the truck in work clothes with Vanguard logos on their shirts. One of the suited men was tall and thin, perhaps 60, with steel-gray hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority. The other was younger, early 30s, carrying a leather briefcase. The work crewmen hung back, arms crossed, looking more like security than laborers. The older man approached the porch. Rachel heard his footsteps on the creaking boards, then a firm knock. "Ms. Blackwood? My name is Richard Calloway. I'm Senior Vice President of Land Acquisition for Vanguard Industries. I'd like to speak with you about your recently inherited property." Rachel didn't move. Her medical training kicked in, heart rate elevated, adrenaline response activated, fight or flight engaged. She forced herself to breathe slowly, maintaining calm for her daughter's sake. Another knock, harder this time. "Ms. Blackwood, I know you're inside. Your car is here, and I saw your daughters playing just minutes ago. I'm not here to cause problems. I simply want to discuss a business proposition." "Don't open it," Lily whispered. Rachel had no intention of opening it. But she needed to know what they wanted. She moved to the window, staying out of direct line of sight. "I'm on private property, Mr. Calloway. You're trespassing." "Ah, good. You are home." The man's voice carried the smooth confidence of a practiced negotiator. "I apologize for the unannounced visit. Cell service is non-existent out here, making it difficult to call ahead. Might we speak face-to-face? I promise I represent no threat. I'm simply a businessman with an offer." "What kind of offer?" "The kind best discussed over coffee, not shouted through doors. I've brought pastries from Coeur d'Alene's finest bakery. Your daughters might enjoy them." The casual mention of her daughters sent ice through Rachel's veins. It was a subtle threat wrapped in false courtesy. "I know about your children. Leave your offer in writing. Mail it to my lawyer, Lawrence Fitzgerald in Coeur d'Alene. He handles all matters related to this property." A pause. "Ms. Blackwood, I'm aware you've recently gone through a difficult divorce. I know your financial situation is precarious. I'm prepared to make you an offer today that would eliminate those concerns permanently." How did he know about her divorce? Had they been researching her? Watching her? "I'm not interested in selling. You haven't heard the offer yet." Calloway's voice hardened slightly, the smooth veneer cracking. "Your uncle was stubborn about this as well. It didn't serve him well in the end." Rachel's blood ran cold. "Are you threatening me?" "Threatening? Absolutely not. Merely observing that isolation isn't always healthy. Your uncle lived here alone for decades, cut off from family, from friends, from any real human connection. That's no life, Ms. Blackwood. Especially not for young children who need stability, community, proper schools. My daughters are fine." "Are they?" "This property is 55 miles from basic services. The structure is in disrepair. Winter comes early and hard in these mountains. Do you really think this is the right environment for an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old? Rachel felt rage building. How dare this stranger lecture her about her children's welfare? "I'll ask you one more time to leave my property." The younger man with the briefcase spoke up. "Ms. Blackwood, we're authorized to offer $4.5 million for this property, as is, with closing in 30 days. That's substantially above market value for land in this condition. $4.5 million. Rachel's mind reeled. That was enough to pay off every debt, buy a house outright, put both girls through college, never worry about money again. "Why?" she called out. "Why would you pay that much for a broken-down farm?" "Vanguard Industries is expanding operations in this region," Calloway responded smoothly. "This property has certain geographical advantages for our purposes. The specific details are confidential, but I assure you our interest is purely logistical." Rachel thought of the contamination maps, the red pins spreading across the valley, the decades of cover-up. "You mean you want to bury your mistakes permanently?" Silence. When Calloway spoke again, the false courtesy was gone. "I don't know what Vincent told you, Ms. Blackwood, but I strongly advise you to be very careful about believing conspiracy theories from a mentally ill hermit who died alone and forgotten." Vincent wasn't mentally ill. He was scared. Scared of people like you. Your uncle was paranoid and delusional. The property he lived on for 30 years has been thoroughly surveyed by multiple independent agencies. There is no contamination, no cover-up, nothing but the fantasies of a troubled man. If you persist in spreading defamatory claims about Vanguard Industries, you'll find our legal team quite aggressive in protecting the company's reputation. There it was, the velvet glove removed, the iron fist revealed. Get off my property, Rachel said, her voice shaking with anger rather than fear. Now. Ms. Blackwood. Now. A long pause. You're making a mistake. This offer won't stand forever. I'll take my chances. She heard footsteps retreating, car doors opening and closing, engine starting. But she didn't move from the window until both vehicles had disappeared down the dirt road, dust plumes marking their departure. Only then did Rachel realize she was shaking. Lily was crying silently, and Maya had her face buried in her mother's side. Who are those men? Maya whimpered. People who want what we have, Rachel said, holding both daughters tight. But they can't have it. What do we have? Lily asked through tears. This place is falling apart. We have the truth, sweetheart. And that's worth more than they're willing to pay to keep it buried. Calling the lawyer. Rachel found the satellite phone in the kitchen, a chunky, military-looking device that Vincent had left with detailed instructions. It took her 3 tries to get a signal, but finally Lawrence Fitzgerald's voice crackled through. Ms. Blackwood? Is everything all right? Rachel explained the visit from Vanguard representatives, their offer, their barely veiled threats. As she talked, she could hear Fitzgerald's sharp intake of breath. $4.5 million. My God, they're desperate. Why? What's on this property that's worth that much to them? Not what's on it, what's under it. And what your uncle documented about it. Ms. Blackwood, I need to be completely honest with you. When Vincent first approached me about becoming his estate attorney 15 years ago, I thought he was paranoid. He made me sign multiple non-disclosure agreements, insisted on elaborate security protocols, spoke about Vanguard Industries like they were a criminal organization rather than a respected corporation. You don't think that anymore? After Vanguard's 30th attempt to purchase his property, this time offering more than double the market value, I started doing my own research. I found patterns. Whistleblowers who tried to expose Vanguard's practices systematically destroyed through lawsuits, smear campaigns, or mysterious accidents. Environmental scientists who tested sites near Vanguard facilities suddenly losing research funding or facing ethics investigations. Journalists who'd written critical articles finding their sources recanting statements. Rachel felt sick. How is that legal? It's not. But proving it is nearly impossible when you're fighting a corporation with unlimited resources and political connections. Vincent understood that. He knew going public would paint a target on his back. What about now? Has anything changed? Fitzgerald was quiet for a moment. The political climate is different. Environmental protections have strengthened. Whistleblower laws offer more protection than they did in the 90s. Social media and independent journalism make it harder to control narratives. If you had ironclad evidence, documentation, physical proof, testimonies, you might have a chance that Vincent never had. And if I don't want to fight? If I just want to sell and walk away? Then you accept their offer, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, and spend the rest of your life wondering if staying silent was worth $4.5 million. He paused. But I don't think that's who you are, Ms. Blackwood. If it were, you wouldn't have called me. You'd have invited Calloway inside. Rachel thought of Vincent's journal entries, of his decades of isolation and regret. Of the health statistics showing hundreds of excess deaths in Salmon River County. Of workers who died from radiation exposure while Vanguard executives got rich. I need to see what's in that underground facility, she said. Vincent's letter says there's documentation down there, medical records, financial documents, video footage. I need to know exactly what we're dealing with before I decide anything. I can be there tomorrow afternoon, Fitzgerald offered. I don't want you going down there alone. Bring a Geiger counter. Vincent says there might be radiation. Jesus Christ. Fitzgerald let out a long breath. All right. I'll bring proper safety equipment. In the meantime, Ms. Blackwood, be very careful. Vanguard knows you're there now. They'll be watching. After ending the call, Rachel stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the seemingly peaceful valley. Mountains rising on all sides. Creeks sparkling in afternoon sunlight. Wildflowers swaying in the breeze. It all looked so innocent. But beneath the surface, literally, lay decades of contamination and corporate malfeasance. Setting boundaries. Rachel spent the rest of the day making the farmhouse more livable and secure. She and Lily replaced burned-out light bulbs, swept away decades of dust, discovered that the old washer still worked, and washed sheets until they smelled like detergent instead of abandonment. Maya found a box of her great-uncle's books in the closet, field guides to Montana wildlife, geology primers, even some children's books about rocks and minerals. She settled on the porch with these, contentedly reading about igneous versus sedimentary formations while Lily helped Rachel in the kitchen. Mom? Lily asked as they organized the pantry with supplies they'd brought from Phoenix. Are we in danger? Rachel had debated how much to share with her daughters. She'd settled on truth, age-appropriately delivered. I don't think we're in physical danger. The men who came today wanted to scare us, but they're businessmen, not criminals. They want this property, but they're not going to hurt us to get it. How do you know? Because hurting us would create exactly the kind of attention they're trying to avoid. If something happened to me or you girls right after they made their offer, that would raise questions. They want this to be a simple business transaction. What if we don't want to make a transaction? Rachel looked at her daughter, so young to be thinking about corporate intimidation and property rights. Then we don't. This land belongs to us now. They can't force us to sell. Can't they just wait until we leave and then dig up whatever they want? Smart kid. That's why Mr. Fitzgerald is coming tomorrow. We're going to document everything we find, create copies, store them in safe places. That way, even if something happened to the evidence here, the truth would still exist elsewhere. Lily was quiet for a moment, organizing canned goods by type. Uncle Vincent spent his whole life protecting this secret. Now it's our job? Only if we choose to accept it. We could sell tomorrow, sign their papers, take the money and never look back. Is that what you want to do? Rachel thought carefully about her answer. A month ago, yes. A month ago, $4 million would have seemed like the answer to every problem. But now, I keep thinking about the people who got sick because Vanguard covered up what they did. About families who lost children or parents or siblings to cancers that might have been prevented if the truth had come out. About Uncle Vincent spending 30 years alone because he was too afraid to speak up. She turned to face Lily directly. I don't want to spend my life wondering if staying silent was the right choice. I don't want you girls to grow up thinking that's how the world works, that rich people can poison communities and get away with it if they have enough money and power. So we're going to fight them? I'm going to see what's in that underground facility first. Then we'll decide together, as a family. This affects all of us. Lily nodded slowly. I want to help. I want to do something that matters. Rachel pulled her daughter into a hug. You matter, sweetheart. You and Maya matter more than any secret or any amount of money. Whatever we do, protecting you two comes first. Evening revelations. That night, after the girls were asleep, Rachel returned to Vincent's study. She couldn't rest knowing that tomorrow she'd be descending into the underground facility. She needed to be as prepared as possible. She found a file labeled Site 7, Construction and Incident Timeline. Inside were photocopied documents that looked official, military requisition forms, construction permits, inspection reports. Rachel spread them across the desk and began piecing together the story. 1965, Site 7 authorized as part of Cold War Defense Network. Location chosen for remoteness and geological stability. Initial construction budget, $24 million. 1966 to 1967, underground facility constructed. Specifications included 3 missile silos, command center, living quarters for permanent military staff, and storage for nuclear warheads. 1968, facility nearing completion. Initial missile components delivered. Security protocols established. February 18, 1969, the incident. The file contained a single-page official report, heavily redacted, with a military seal. Classified top secret. Site 7 incident report. Date, February 18, 1969. At approximately 14:30 hours, during routine maintenance of Silo 2, a catastrophic failure of redacted resulted in exposure of 17 personnel to redacted. Emergency protocols initiated. All exposed personnel transported to redacted for treatment. Contamination levels measured at redacted in immediate vicinity, redacted in surrounding areas. Facility deemed unsafe for continued operations. Recommendation: immediate decommissioning and containment. Estimated remediation cost, $180 million. Decision: redacted. The next document in the file was a handwritten memo on Vanguard Industries letterhead, dated March 3, 1969. To General Marcus Holland, DOD. From Kenneth Drummond, VP Operations. Site 7 remediation proposal. As discussed, Vanguard Industries proposes an alternative to full-scale remediation that would save the Department of Defense approximately $175 million. Seal contaminated sections of the facility. Cover site with minimum 20 feet of clean fill. Destroy all documentation of incident. Relocate exposed personnel to geographically dispersed locations. Classify all information related to Site 7 at highest security levels. Timeline: 4 to 6 months. Cost: $5 million. This approach eliminates the contamination problem while avoiding the public scrutiny and political fallout that would accompany a full disclosure and remediation effort. We await your authorization to proceed. Rachel's hands shook as she read. They hadn't cleaned up the contamination. They'd just buried it. The next documents confirmed her worst fears. Lists of the 17 exposed workers, with notations about their subsequent medical treatment, or lack thereof. Most had been assigned to different military bases across the country, their medical records sealed under national security provisions. By 1975, 14 of the 17 were dead. The 3 survivors had been paid settlements in exchange for non-disclosure agreements. One later broke the agreement and spoke to a journalist. Within 6 months, he was dead from what officials called a hunting accident. The journalist's article was never published, and she left investigative reporting shortly after. Rachel found photos next. Black and white images of the construction site before the incident, men in work clothes, military personnel in uniform, massive equipment digging into the earth. Then photos from after, yellow hazmat suits, equipment being loaded onto trucks, concrete being poured into what looked like an enormous grave. The final photos showed the finished cover-up, a gentle valley with nothing visible except newly planted grass, a small barn built to disguise ventilation shafts, a farmhouse constructed to give the appearance of normal agricultural use. It had all been theater. A stage set designed to hide mass contamination. A sticky note in Vincent's handwriting was attached to the last photo. I purchased this property in 1992 because I couldn't bear the thought of someone else living here unknowingly. Every day I stayed, I was protecting others from exposure. But I was also enabling the lie to continue. I don't know if that makes me a hero or a coward. Probably both. Rachel closed the file and pressed her palms against her eyes. Tomorrow, she'd see it all firsthand. The facility where 17 men had been irradiated. The contamination that had been buried but never truly gone. The evidence that could bring down one of the most powerful corporations in America. She thought of Callaway's offer. $4.5 million. Financial security forever. All she had to do was sign papers promising to never speak about what she found. But she thought about those 17 workers, most barely older than she was now. About their families, who'd spent decades wondering why their healthy sons and husbands and fathers had suddenly developed aggressive cancers. About the downstream communities still being exposed to contamination in their groundwater. About Uncle Vincent, alone and afraid for 30 years. About the kind of world she wanted Lily and Maya to grow up in. Tomorrow, she whispered to the empty study. Tomorrow we find out just how deep this goes. Outside, the Idaho night was vast and dark. Somewhere in that darkness, Vanguard Industries was watching, waiting, calculating their next move. But they didn't know Rachel Blackwood yet. Didn't know she'd spent 2 years fighting for her daughters against a man with money and lawyers and connections. Didn't know she'd learned how to be afraid and still keep moving forward. They thought she was just another desperate single mother who'd fold under pressure. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Lawrence Fitzgerald arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, his pickup truck loaded with equipment that looked like it belonged in a hazmat operation. He'd brought proper respirators, Geiger counters, protective suits, industrial flashlights, and a professional-grade camera system. I contacted a friend who works in environmental remediation, Fitzgerald explained as he unloaded gear. Told him I was doing research on abandoned Cold War sites. He didn't ask questions, but he insisted I bring all this. Rachel had left the girls with strict instructions to stay in the house, windows closed, doors locked. Lily had wanted to come, but Rachel had been firm. Not until we know it's safe. You're in charge of your sister. If we're not back in 3 hours, you call 911 on the satellite phone. The walk to the barn felt longer than it was. In daylight, the structure looked even more decrepit, roof sagging, walls weathered silver gray, the whole thing listing to one side like a ship taking on water. Your uncle was clever, Fitzgerald observed. This looks abandoned, but look at the foundation. Solid concrete, maybe 3 feet thick. This wasn't built to store hay. Inside, the barn was dim and musty. Ancient farming equipment lay scattered about, a rusted tractor, broken plows, coils of rotting rope. Hay bales were stacked in the northeast corner, exactly where Vincent's letter had indicated. Together, Rachel and Fitzgerald moved the bales. They were surprisingly light, as if they'd been moved many times before. Beneath them, set into the concrete floor, was a steel hatch about 4 feet square, painted to blend with the surrounding concrete. A combination lock secured the handle. Rachel's hands trembled as she knelt beside it. My mother's birthday. March 15, 1954. So that's March 15, 54. The lock clicked open on the first try. Last chance to walk away, Fitzgerald said quietly. Once we open this, there's no one knowing what we find. Rachel thought of Vincent's decades of silence, of the 17 workers who'd died for Vanguard's profit margins, of Lily asking if they were going to fight. Open it. The hatch lifted with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a metal ladder descending into darkness. Cool air rushed up, carrying a faint metallic scent. Fitzgerald activated his Geiger counter, and immediately it began clicking, not the frantic staccato of dangerous radiation, but a steady rhythm above background levels. Elevated but not immediately dangerous, he said, studying the readout. We'll need to limit our exposure time. 2 hours maximum. Rachel pulled on the respirator, feeling claustrophobic immediately but knowing it was necessary. Fitzgerald descended first, testing each rung. Then Rachel followed, climbing down into the earth, into history, into the secret that had consumed her uncle's life. The underground facility. The ladder dropped 20 feet into a concrete corridor lit by emergency lights that still functioned after 5 decades. Rachel's flashlight beam revealed walls covered in faded signs, authorized personnel only, radiation hazard, Site 7, command level. The Geiger counters clicking intensified as they moved deeper. Fitzgerald photographed everything, the corridor, the signs, the radiation readings displayed on the counter's screen. They reached a heavy steel door marked main chamber. It stood open, and beyond it lay what looked like a massive underground bunker. The space was enormous, easily 100 feet across, with a ceiling 20 feet high supported by concrete pillars. This had been designed to withstand nuclear attack. But it wasn't the architecture that made Rachel stop and stare. It was what filled the space. Filing cabinets lined every wall, dozens of them. A large conference table held boxes of documents. Shelving units contained books, binders, videotapes, and what looked like computer equipment from the early 90s. A cork board on one wall displayed a massive flowchart showing Vanguard Industries' corporate structure, with red lines connecting executives to government officials. "My God," Fitzgerald whispered. "Vincent built an entire archive down here." Rachel approached the nearest filing cabinet. The drawer was labeled Medical Records, Exposed Personnel 1969 to 1975. She pulled it open and found dozens of thick folders, each one a person's medical history. She pulled one at random. Thomas Kowalski, age 24, specialist 4th class, U.S. Army. The folder contained military service records, medical examinations, and a heartbreaking timeline. February 18, 1969, exposed to radiation during Silo 2 incident. March 1969, reassigned to Fort Benning, Georgia. April 1969, first symptoms, nausea, fatigue. June 1969, diagnosis of acute myeloid leukemia. September 1969, medical discharge. October 1969, died at VA hospital in Atlanta. 7 months from exposure to death. He'd been 24 years old. Rachel pulled another file. Marcus Chen, age 22, Airman 1st Class, U.S. Air Force. Same pattern. Exposure, reassignment, illness, death. Marcus had lasted 11 months. They scattered them, Rachel realized, her voice shaking. Sent them to bases all over the country so no one would notice the pattern. 17 men exposed in one incident, but they die in 17 different locations, and nobody connects the dots. Except Vincent, Fitzgerald added. He was photographing the medical records, his camera flash creating stark shadows. He connected the dots. How did he get all this? Rachel found the answer in another filing cabinet labeled Source Documentation. Vincent had spent decades filing Freedom of Information Act requests, tracking down family members of the deceased workers, even hiring private investigators to locate sealed military records. The paper trail of his obsession filled drawer after drawer. The video evidence. In the corner of the chamber, Rachel found what looked like a small media center, a television, VCR, and boxes of videotapes carefully labeled in Vincent's handwriting. The tape-marked Site 7 day of incident sat on top, as if waiting for her. "Do you think it still works?" Rachel asked, gesturing to the old equipment. Fitzgerald checked the connections. Only one way to find out. The television flickered to life, showing static. Then the VCR whirred, and grainy black and white footage appeared. The timestamp read February 18, 1969, 14:22. The camera looked down into what must have been one of the missile silos, a massive cylindrical shaft descending into the earth, with catwalks and equipment surrounding a sleek missile. Workers in protective suits moved about, apparently performing routine maintenance. Their voices came through muffled, punctuated by the clang of metal tools and the hum of machinery. At 14:28, something changed. One worker shouted, the words unclear but the panic obvious. Others turned, pointed. Then an alarm began blaring. The camera shook. Smoke or gas began filling the silo, Rachel couldn't tell which. Workers scrambled for the ladder leading up and out. But the gas or whatever it was moved faster, engulfing them. The footage became chaotic. The camera tilted as if the person operating it had dropped it. For a moment, Rachel saw a man's face pressed against the camera lens, eyes wide with terror, mouth open in a silent scream. Then static. When the image returned, the timestamp showed 30 minutes had passed. The silo was empty of people but filled with emergency personnel in full hazmat suits. A Geiger counter in someone's hand showed readings that made Rachel's stomach turn. The tape ended. Rachel realized she was crying. Fitzgerald looked pale behind his respirator. "That's evidence," he said quietly. "That's video documentation of the incident. With the timestamp, with the chaos, with everything. This proves it happened." Vincent said there were more tapes, Rachel managed. "In the media archives. They found dozens more. Video of military officials discussing the cover-up. Audio recordings of phone calls between Vanguard executives and Department of Defense officials. Even a recorded conversation where Kenneth Drummond, then a Vanguard VP, explicitly stated, 17 men aren't worth $180 million. We bury this, we save the money, and in 30 years nobody will remember it happened." Rachel photographed everything while Fitzgerald worked the camera. They documented medical records, financial documents showing payoffs to families in exchange for silence, internal Vanguard memos discussing the Site 7 problem, and geological surveys that Vincent had conducted showing the contamination spreading through groundwater. The geological evidence. In a room Vincent had labeled current contamination data, Rachel found what might be the most damning evidence of all. Her uncle had been conducting regular tests of soil and water samples from across the property and the surrounding area for 3 decades. The data was meticulously organized by year, with maps showing contamination spread like a slow-motion plague. What had been confined to the immediate vicinity of the buried facility in 1970 had spread by 1985 to the property's creek. By 2000, trace elements were showing up in Elk Ridge's water supply. By 2020, the contamination had reached every community within a 20-mile radius downstream. This isn't just historical, Rachel realized. This is ongoing. People are being exposed right now. She found Vincent's calculations of estimated health impacts. Based on contamination levels and population data, he projected that the buried waste from Site 7 had likely contributed to hundreds of excess cancers and dozens of deaths over 50 years. "We need to get samples," Fitzgerald said, already reaching for collection equipment Vincent had left. "Independent verification that confirms your uncle's data." They spent another hour collecting soil and water samples from various locations on the property, carefully labeling and documenting each one. The Geiger counter readings varied. Some areas showed only slightly elevated levels, while others near the old silo locations showed radiation that made Fitzgerald's face tighten with concern. "We need to evacuate your daughters from the house," he said urgently. "Today. Those safe zone markers on the map might not be accurate anymore. Contamination spreads." Rachel's heart seized. "You think they're in danger?" "I think we can't be certain they're not, and that's enough. We get them out, get these samples tested at an independent lab, and then we decide our next move." The financial trail. Before leaving, Rachel found the safe Vincent had mentioned. Her birthday reversed in DDMMYY format, June 15, 88, June 15, 1988. Inside were documents that transformed this from an environmental disaster into a corporate crime story. Financial records showing that Vanguard Industries had saved approximately $175 million by covering up Site 7 instead of properly remediating it. But more than that, evidence that Vanguard executives had personally profited. Kenneth Drummond, the VP who'd proposed the cover-up, had received a $5 million bonus in 1970. His career skyrocketed after Site 7, CEO by 1987, board member until his death in 2018. The money he'd saved the company had made him rich and powerful. Current Vanguard executives had inherited this secret, Rachel realized. The cover-up had started 50 years ago, but it was maintained by people still in power today. People like Richard Calloway, who'd stood on her porch and offered her millions to stay quiet about crimes he was still actively concealing. "We have everything we need," Fitzgerald said, surveying their documentation. Medical records proving 17 deaths. Video evidence of the incident. Audio recordings of executives discussing the cover-up. Financial documents showing profiteering. And geological data proving ongoing contamination. Will it be enough? Rachel asked. To prosecute? Maybe, maybe not. Statute of limitations might protect them legally. But to expose them publicly? To force EPA investigation and remediation? To get compensation for affected families? Absolutely. The confrontation returns. They emerged from the facility 3 hours after descending, blinking in bright afternoon sunlight. Rachel immediately ran to the house, needing to see her daughters, to hold them and know they were safe. But the house was empty. Lily? Maya? Rachel's voice climbed toward panic. Girls. She found a note on the kitchen table in Lily's handwriting. Mom, Mr. Calloway came back with more people. They said you sent them to take us somewhere safe because of radiation. Maya was scared, so I went with them. Sorry. Love you. Rachel's world tilted. The note included a phone number. With shaking hands, she dialed. Calloway answered on the first ring. Ms. Blackwood. I assume you found my note. Where are my daughters? Rachel could barely force the words out past the rage and terror. They're perfectly safe, I assure you. Playing video games in a very comfortable office in Coeur d'Alene, enjoying pizza and soda. They think they're on an exciting field trip. You kidnapped them. I removed them from a contaminated site for their own safety. If anything, you should thank me. His voice was calm, reasonable, monstrous. Now, I think we need to renegotiate our arrangement. I'm calling the police. And telling them what? That the kind businessman who rescued your children from a radiation hazard is actually a villain? Ms. Blackwood, I have two 12-year-old witnesses who will testify I was nothing but gentle and concerned. What do you have? Rachel felt Fitzgerald's hand on her shoulder, steadying her. He gestured for her to put the phone on speaker. What do you want? Rachel asked. The same thing I wanted before, but now I'm prepared to pay substantially more. $10 million for the property, plus another $5 million in a trust fund for your daughter's education. In exchange, you sign paperwork transferring ownership, you sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements, and you give me every single document, video, and piece of evidence you removed from that underground facility. And if I refuse? Then your daughters remain where they are while we discuss your parental fitness. Exposing children to radiation hazards, dragging them to an isolated location with no proper medical care, keeping them out of school. I have 3 lawyers who'd be happy to file emergency custody petitions. Your ex-husband might be interested in revisiting your custody arrangement as well. I believe we could locate him easily enough. The threat was clear and terrifying. Rachel could fight Vanguard, but could she fight for her daughters while doing it? Let me talk to them, she demanded. A pause, then Maya's voice, Mommy? This place is so cool. They have every video game ever. But when are you coming to get us? Soon, baby. Very soon. Is your sister there? Yeah, she's playing too, but she looks worried. Are we in trouble? No, sweetheart. No trouble. Just stay together and be good, okay? I love you. Love you too. Calloway's voice returned. You have 2 hours to decide. Bring everything you took from the facility to the Vanguard Regional Office in Coeur d'Alene. Sign the papers, take your money, collect your daughters, and everyone goes home happy. And if I go to the police? I doubt you will. But if you do, you'll find that Vanguard has considerable influence in this region. We employ thousands of people. We fund hospitals and schools. We donate generously to political campaigns and police foundations. You're a single mother with a history of instability, according to court documents from your divorce, making wild claims about 50-year-old conspiracies. Who do you think they'll believe? The line went dead. Rachel stood frozen, the phone still in her hand. Her daughters were hostages. She had evidence that could expose corporate mass murder, but what good was justice if it cost her Lily and Maya? We go get them, Fitzgerald said firmly. Right now. We call the police, report a kidnapping, and And Vanguard's lawyers tie everything up in legal knots for months while my daughters are traumatized and my custody is questioned. Rachel's nurse training kicked in, forcing calm over panic. Calloway's right about one thing, he's got resources and connections we don't have. So what do you want to do? Rachel looked at the evidence they'd collected. Boxes of documents. Photographs. Video files. Geological samples. Her uncle's 30 years of work. Proof that could bring down one of the most powerful corporations in America. Then she looked at Lily's note. Maya was scared, so I went with them. Sorry. Love you. Her daughter, trying to protect her little sister. Her daughters, who needed their mother more than the world needed another whistleblower story. I want my daughters back, Rachel said. Everything else is secondary. The plan. We give them what they want, Rachel continued, her mind racing through options. But not before we make copies of everything. Multiple copies. Stored in different locations. Fitzgerald's eyes widened. You want to sign their agreements and keep evidence anyway? That's legally. I don't care about legally right now. I care about my daughters. I'll sign whatever papers get them back safely. But I won't let Vincent's work die. I won't let those 17 men stay buried. She pulled out her phone, checking for signal. Weak but present. We need to move fast. How long to make copies of everything? The videos and audio alone will take hours to digitize and upload. Then we prioritize. What's the most damaging evidence? They worked frantically. Fitzgerald had brought a portable scanner and laptop. They scanned the most critical documents, the video footage of the incident, the audio recordings of executives discussing the cover-up, the medical records of the 17 dead workers, the financial documents showing profiteering, and Vincent's geological surveys showing ongoing contamination. Rachel uploaded everything to a cloud storage account, then created multiple copies sent to different email addresses she set up on the spot. She burned DVDs of the video evidence. She made sure no single point of failure could erase what they'd found. Send copies to 3 different journalists, she instructed Fitzgerald. Environmental reporters who've covered corporate malfeasance before. Include context from Vincent's documentation. Tell them to sit on the story until I give them the signal, but if anything happens to me or my daughters, they publish everything immediately. That's basically a dead man's switch, Fitzgerald said. Exactly. Vanguard needs to know that silencing me won't silence the story. Within 90 minutes, they'd created a digital insurance policy. The evidence existed in a dozen locations now, with multiple people who would release it if Rachel or her family came to harm. Then Rachel did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She loaded all of Vincent's original documentation into boxes, preparing to hand it over to the very people who'd been trying to bury it for 50 years. The exchange. The Vanguard regional office was an imposing glass and steel structure on the outskirts of Coeur d'Alene. Rachel arrived with Fitzgerald at exactly the 2-hour deadline, boxes of evidence in the truck bed. Richard Calloway met them in the lobby, all false warmth and corporate courtesy. Ms. Blackwood. I'm pleased you've chosen the sensible path. Your daughters are upstairs, perfectly safe. Once we complete the paperwork, you can see them. I want to see them now. Business first. I'm sure you understand. Rachel wanted to punch his smug face. But she followed him to a conference room where 3 lawyers waited with stacks of documents. Transfer of property ownership. Non-disclosure agreements. Comprehensive liability waivers. Legal language that essentially said Rachel would never speak about Site 7, Vanguard Industries, or anything related to the contamination ever again. This is extortion, Fitzgerald observed. This is business, Calloway corrected. Ms. Blackwood is selling property she inherited, receiving generous compensation, and agreeing to reasonable confidentiality terms. Nothing illegal about it. Rachel read through the documents carefully. The agreements were comprehensive and punitive. Any violation would result in immediate forfeiture of all money received, plus penalties of up to $50 million. She would be legally gagged for life. But between the lines, she found what she needed. The agreements prevented her from speaking about Site 7 or making public statements about Vanguard. But they said nothing about evidence that might already be in other people's possession. Nothing about what journalists might publish based on information provided by her late uncle's estate attorney, acting independently. "I need one modification," Rachel said. Calloway's eyes narrowed. "We're not negotiating. It's minor. The custody provision, I want it in writing that Vanguard Industries will never contact my daughters, never approach them, never surveil them or interfere in their lives. And if anything happens to me, accident, illness, anything, they receive the full trust fund immediately with no conditions." "Why would anything happen to you?" Rachel met his gaze steadily. "I'm a single mother in a dangerous world. I want my daughters protected." After a whispered consultation with lawyers, Calloway agreed. The provision was added. Rachel signed. Every page felt like betrayal, of Vincent, of the 17 dead workers, of every person still being exposed to contamination. But she signed because her daughters were upstairs, and nothing mattered more than getting them back safely. "The evidence?" Calloway prompted once the signing was complete. Rachel gestured to Fitzgerald, who brought in the boxes. Calloway's people immediately began checking contents, verifying that the medical records, videos, and documents were all present. "And the geological samples your attorney collected today?" Rachel handed over the sealed containers. Calloway examined them, then nodded to his team. Everything Vincent had spent 30 years protecting was now in Vanguard's hands. "Excellent. Your wire transfer will complete within 24 hours. $15 million, as agreed." Calloway actually smiled. "You've made the right choice, Ms. Blackwood. You and your daughters can now build a wonderful life, free from these burdens." "Can I see my daughters now?" "Of course. They're in the employee lounge on the 5th floor." Rachel practically ran to the elevator. Fitzgerald followed, carrying the paperwork that had just made her a millionaire and a sellout in equal measure. Reunion and revelation. Lily and Maya were exactly where Calloway had said, playing video games and drinking soda. They looked up when Rachel burst in, and Maya immediately ran to her. "Mommy! Did you see the office? It's huge." Lily followed more slowly, guilt written across her face. "Mom, I'm sorry. They said you sent them, and Maya was scared about the radiation, and..." "It's okay, baby. It's okay." Rachel held both daughters tight, breathing in the scent of their hair, feeling their heartbeats against hers. Safe. They were safe. "Are we going home now?" Maya asked. "Back to the farmhouse?" "No, sweetheart. We're selling the farmhouse. We're going to find somewhere new to live. Somewhere safe and happy." "But what about Uncle Vincent's secret?" Lily asked quietly. Rachel looked at her eldest daughter's perceptive face. "Uncle Vincent's secret is going to be taken care of. Just not by us." As they left the Vanguard building, Rachel felt Calloway's eyes on her back. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd buried the truth one more time, paid off another threat, continued the 50-year cover-up. He had no idea what was about to hit him. 6 weeks later. Rachel sat in a modest but comfortable rental house in Boise, Idaho, far enough from Site 7 to feel safe, close enough to stay connected to what was unfolding. Lily and Maya were enrolled in good schools. The nightmares about the farmhouse were fading. The $15 million sat in carefully managed accounts, ensuring their future. But Rachel watched the news every night, waiting. It started with an article in the Environmental Investigator, a respected outlet for corporate accountability journalism, Buried Truth, how Vanguard Industries covered up radiation deaths for 50 years. The story included video footage from the 1969 incident, audio recordings of executives discussing the cover-up, medical records of 17 men who'd died, and geological surveys showing ongoing contamination. It named names, showed faces, presented evidence that was impossible to dismiss. The reporter credited their source as documents provided by the estate of Vincent Cartwright, deceased whistleblower, with additional research by Lawrence Fitzgerald, attorney. Rachel's name appeared nowhere in the article. She'd kept her agreement to the letter. The response was immediate and explosive. The Environmental Protection Agency announced emergency testing of Salmon River County groundwater. The Department of Justice opened a criminal investigation into Vanguard Industries. Families of the 17 dead workers filed wrongful death lawsuits. Congress scheduled hearings. Within a week, Vanguard's stock had dropped 40%. Richard Calloway resigned to pursue other opportunities. Kenneth Drummond's legacy was destroyed, his name now synonymous with corporate murder for profit. Rachel watched it all unfold from her comfortable distance, protected by the non-disclosure agreement that prevented anyone from connecting her to the revelations. Vanguard couldn't come after her without admitting they'd paid her millions to stay quiet about crimes they claimed didn't exist. The reckoning. 3 months after the story broke, Rachel received a visitor. Marlene Hutchins, the nurse from Elk Ridge that Vincent had mentioned in his task list. She was in her 70s now, with white hair and sharp eyes that had seen too much. "Your uncle asked me to wait," Marlene said over tea in Rachel's kitchen. "Said that someday someone from his family would do what he couldn't. He wanted me to tell you what I saw that day at Site 7. You were there? In 1969? I was 24, fresh out of nursing school, assigned to the base infirmary. I treated some of those boys after the exposure. Watched them die over the next year, scattered across the country but all dying the same way. Vanguard paid me $50,000 to sign papers saying I'd never talk about it. Why are you talking about it now? Because I'm dying. Lung cancer, probably from my own exposure that day. And because those boys deserve someone to remember their names, to say out loud what was done to them." Marlene pulled out a photograph, 17 young men in military uniforms, smiling at the camera, unaware they had only months to live. Thomas Kowalski. Marcus Chen. David Martinez. James Washington. Kevin O'Brien. All the rest. They were somebody's sons, somebody's brothers. They deserved better than being buried under lies and concrete. Rachel took the photo, studying the faces. So young. So alive in that moment before everything changed. "Vincent wanted you to know you did the right thing," Marlene continued. "He kept track of you over the years, proud of you even from a distance. He knew that if anyone could finish what he started, it would be you." "I sold out," Rachel admitted. "I took their money and signed their papers. You protected your daughters and still got the truth out. Vincent would call that wisdom, not selling out." Marlene smiled. "Those corporate bastards thought they'd won. Then the story breaks, and they can't figure out how." Beautiful. After Marlene left, Rachel sat with the photograph for a long time. 17 young men who'd paid the price for corporate profit margins. She'd signed papers promising never to speak about them. But others could speak. The story was out now, spreading like wildfire, impossible to contain. Vincent had been right. Sometimes the truth just needed the right moment, the right messenger, the right circumstances. He'd spent 30 years laying the groundwork. Rachel had added the final piece. 1 year later, the Salmon River County Memorial was dedicated on a beautiful fall day. Rachel attended anonymously, just another face in the crowd, with Lily and Maya beside her. The memorial listed 17 names, the workers who'd died from radiation exposure at Site 7. Beneath them, a plaque explained what had happened, who was responsible, and why it had taken 50 years for the truth to emerge. Because of whistleblower Vincent Cartwright, the plaque read, who spent his life documenting this injustice and ensuring evidence would survive to expose it. The EPA had completed remediation of the site. Vanguard Industries had paid $850 million in settlements to affected families and communities. 3 executives had been criminally indicted. The company itself was facing bankruptcy from legal fees and lost contracts. Justice was slow and imperfect, but it had come. "Mom," Lily asked quietly, "did you know him?" Vincent Cartwright? Rachel squeezed her daughter's hand. He was my uncle. He was brave and scared and flawed and heroic, all at once. Kind of like everyone else. Did he know he'd change things? I think he hoped. That's all any of us can do, hope that doing the right thing matters, even if we don't see the results. As they walked back to their car, Rachel thought about the farmhouse, now a super fun cleanup site. About the underground facility, finally exposed to sunlight. About her uncle, who'd died alone but hadn't died in vain. She thought about the $15 million that was providing security and opportunity for her daughters. Blood money, maybe. But also justice money, extracted from those who'd profited from death, now funding life. Maya tugged her hand. Mom? Are you sad? No, baby. I'm grateful. For what? Rachel looked at her daughters, healthy, safe, free to grow up in a world where truth had prevailed over power, at least this once. For second chances. For brave people who do hard things. For the fact that sometimes, the good guys actually win. As they drove away from the memorial, Rachel glanced in the rearview mirror at the mountains surrounding the valley. Beautiful and deadly and finally being cleaned up. Vincent's legacy, preserved by his courage and Rachel's calculated risk. She'd signed papers promising to stay silent. But silence could have many forms. Her silence protected her family while others told the story. Her silence was strategic, not complicit. And on quiet nights, when Lily and Maya were asleep and Rachel sat alone with her thoughts, she spoke to Vincent's memory. Told him thank you. Told him she understood now why he'd stayed, why he'd documented, why he'd passed the burden to her. You weren't a coward, Uncle Vincent, she whispered to the darkness. You were patient. You were waiting for the right time, the right person. I hope I did right by you. Somewhere in the Idaho night, she liked to imagine, Vincent Cartwright rested easier. The secret he'd carried for 30 years had finally been spoken aloud. The men who'd died had finally been honored. The truth had finally won. And Rachel Blackwood, single mother and accidental whistleblower, had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept an inheritance you never wanted and use it to change the world, one exposed secret at a time. Epilogue, 5 years later. The Blackwood Foundation for Environmental Justice opened its doors on a crisp autumn morning in Boise. Rachel stood beside Lily, now 17 and already accepted to college environmental science programs, and Maya, 13 and fierce in her determination to make bad companies pay for hurting people. The foundation, funded by the Vanguard settlement money, provided legal support for communities facing corporate contamination, supported whistleblowers who needed protection, and maintained a digital archive of corporate malfeasance, including everything Vincent had documented about Site 7. We're not going to stay silent when we see injustice, Rachel told the reporters at the opening ceremony. We're going to shine light on darkness and support others who have the courage to speak truth to power. A reporter asked, Your foundation is named Blackwood, but funded by money from the Vanguard Industries settlement. Some critics say that's profiting from tragedy. Rachel had prepared for this question. My uncle, Vincent Cartwright, spent 30 years trying to expose what Vanguard did. The money my family received was compensation for the burden he carried and the isolation he endured. Using it to prevent future tragedies isn't profiting, it's honoring his legacy by ensuring no one else has to stay silent out of fear. That evening, as the foundation's doors closed after a successful opening, Rachel stood alone in the main office. On the wall hung the photograph Marlene Hutchins had given her, 17 young men in military uniforms, finally remembered, finally honored. Beside it hung a picture of Vincent Cartwright, taken in his farmhouse study, surrounded by books and evidence and the determination that had defined his life. We did it, Uncle Vincent, Rachel said softly. The truth won. The bad guys lost. And your secret became a light that still shines. Outside, Boise's lights glimmered against the night sky. Inside, the foundation's computers hummed with purpose, ready to support the next whistleblower, the next truth teller, the next ordinary person who found themselves holding extraordinary secrets. Rachel had learned that inheritances come in many forms. Money and property, yes. But also responsibility, courage, and the understanding that sometimes the most valuable thing you can pass down is the truth, and the determination to make sure it's heard. She'd inherited a broken farmhouse and found a $157 million secret. But she'd also inherited Vincent's mission, his courage, and his unwavering belief that justice delayed is not justice denied. And in the end, that inheritance had changed everything.